Hello.
Hola, ¿cómo estás? Look, I'm wearing the same shirt when I said I'm going to be wearing this shirt.
You are.
Yeah. Well, I certainly wasn't sitting downstairs 3 minutes ago, if that's what you're asking.
And good evening, family.
Good
Hello.
evening. Good evening.
It looks like your picture for your badge or something you got there.
Yeah, let me do something better. How about that?
You know,
Yeah, that picture came from my cell phone, bus 4 feet away.
I'm reporting to you live from Gallup Park.
Nice.
Are you?
You're totally there, Mike. Totally there, Mike.
The boats are out. There's a van. Hopefully my daughter's not driving that van yet. She hasn't been trained. Also practicing to be a weatherman. So
That's good. Keep practicing your
up
green
here
screen
we have the
skills.
City of Ann Arbor logo.
Where's the storm front moving?
I think based on that way.
That
No,
way?
wait. That way. Well, that would be the
That way?
north side. Yeah, that would be the north side of the river. So I'm on the south bank, west to east,
Yep.
right?
So the front is moving east to west. Which weather never comes east to west around here.
No.
Rarely. Rarely.
If it does, you're in trouble
Yeah.
because that means something bad's about to take place.
Truth.
Well, we have 7 guests and 5 panelists. Kim, do you have the quiz ready?
Oh, yeah. That's what we should have done. Quiz questions.
I've done these with poll questions and they're kind of fun, actually. I mean, get you a little bit of interaction. So
If I could figure out how to do that, that would be fun. But I have not cracked that nut. So
it takes some prep ahead of time. I haven't had to do it all by myself. I've always had people help me. So
oh, okay.
so do you have sharing privileges? You're doing the presentation, right? You've got it queued up.
I do, yes.
Okay.
Got it right here. Ready to roll.
Excuse me. And you're going to be the lead off and I'm the closer.
Yes. Did everyone see the question slides I inserted? So like a prompt for
That was good. Very
the
nice,
end of
very
the
good.
sections. Plus then the next person will know who's up next.
We're missing Tammy.
We are.
Somebody's raising, somebody's raising their hand, but I don't think that's Tammy.
No.
Sarah, are you listening to us?
Yep, I sure am.
Okay. We have chat turned on for this.
I have the Q&A turned on.
Oh, perfect. Got
If that's all right with y'all.
it. Yes. Is everyone familiar with the Q&A and how that works?
No, but I'm sure I'll figure it out.
I've seen it, but
Okay.
no.
So if you want, since I've got some familiarity with it, and because I go last, I will, if somebody posts a question, then I will send, or I'll just let you know what the question is and you can answer it. Okay. That sound good for everybody? Hello, Tammy.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I'll just facilitate.
So are we gonna do questions in the Q&A box, not like people won't talk at us like they did last time.
Sarah, that's correct, right?
Yeah, that's correct. They're not gonna speak.
Okay.
We're in what, webinar mode or whatever it's called, so you'd have to be promoted or something like that, so.
Yeah.
We do have one
Okay.
guest who is asking, is there a way to see who else is attending?
I don't know how to do that. Is that like bad of me? Am I?
Right now, we have 11 attendees.
Like, I wouldn't know how to like show that, I guess.
Yeah, if you want to see if you can figure that out while I guess we got a minute yet.
So then when we get to the questions slide, Mike, you'll facilitate if there's any questions related to the topic that just got talked about then?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Sounds like a plan.
If you click on the Q&A in the bottom of your screen, you'll be able to see the questions if you want. But if you don't want that nuisance, then I got 2 screens here at home, so I got plenty of screen real estate here. Do you want to see if you can fire up the presentation so we know that that's
Yep,
working?
so I'm just gonna share my screen then with this one.
Perfect.
You see it?
Yep.
Awesome.
All right, it's 6:31.
So we're intending to answer the questions verbally, right? The questions are going to come in written form, and then we're just going to provide verbal responses, right?
Yep.
Yes, correct.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, I'll click on those. So is there a way to see who else is attending? I don't, well, it looks like Peter Honeyman said, we, the attendees, can announce ourselves here. Hello, attendees and presenters. So if you're an attendee, the easiest way to do this is just type hello in the question box. I won't treat that as a question, but then everyone will know that you're here. So feel free to go ahead and do that. And that way people can see that whole thing. Okay. So it's 6:31. Hi, I'm Mike Pettigrew. I'm the city treasurer. I guess I'm standing in for Marty Prashant today, who is our chief financial officer, but could not be with us. Kim Bosselmeyer is going to start off our presentation. We've got 29 slides, it looks like. And as you have questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A. As we were just kind of discussing our roles here, every time we switch presenters, before we switch that presenter, I'll go through the questions that you've asked and we'll try to get them answered for you. So welcome and thank you for joining us. I'll turn it over to Kim.
All right, thank you, Mike. Good evening to everyone out there. Thank you for taking the time to join us this evening and learn about the exciting world of finance within the city. My name is Kim Bosselmeyer, and I am a budget and finance supervisor for the city. And I have been with the city for nearly 10 years now. So just as Mike said, just a reminder, there are some question slides as we go through different sections of the presentation, and feel free to type your questions in at any time. When we get to those slides, we'll answer those for you live if we can. So let's just dive right into it here. See if I can get this to move forward. Yes, there we go. Okay. All right. So our finance area is comprised of 36 employees across 5 different areas, and we perform a whole host of functions here for the city. So we have our budget and forecasting area, which is my area of expertise. And this area is responsible for putting together the budget every fiscal year, and we forecast all the revenues and expenses that every department is going to need. We have our accounting, audit, and payroll unit. They do accounts payable, receivables, all of our accounting and auditing functions, and biweekly payroll for all city employees. We also have our purchasing department, which oversees the procurement of goods and services. We have our assessing department, which establishes assessed and taxable values for all the taxable property within the city. And they administer principal residency exemptions and that process divisions of land and maintain digital mapping of all of the property lines. And finally, we have treasury and customer service and risk management. The treasury and customer service area collects and distributes any revenues coming into the city, such as from our property taxes and parking tickets. And then the risk management area identifies and assesses any risks to the city and implements any procedures to minimize those risks. So most of what we do in finance is determined by federal or state law. As an example, Public Act 2 of 1968, which is the Uniform Budgeting and Accounting Act, requires all units of local government to maintain a uniform chart of accounts for financial management and reporting purposes. This act also requires units of local government to file with the Department of Treasury annual financial and annual audit reports within 180 days of fiscal year end. And it requires units of local government to follow uniform procedures with regard to our annual budget formulation, adoption, and monitoring. So with that, I'm going to dive into what makes up our revenue and our expenditures for the city. So how do we generate our revenue here at the city? We have a variety of sources that we get that from. The largest source of revenue for the city includes our charges for services. And this is things like our utility billing, our parks and recreation fees, and parking enforcement. We also receive money from the state, which we call state shared revenue, and that's generated from state sales tax, and it is apportioned to communities across the state of Michigan. The state sets the formula for how much each local unit will receive. And finally, property taxes are a huge chunk of revenue for the city, and they're approximately 50% of the income that the city gets in our general fund. So this slide here actually shows your property tax dollars at work for tax year 2021. So you can see that actually only about 24 cents of every property tax dollar that you pay is actually received by the city. The rest of the tax dollars that you are paying when you're paying your city tax bill are actually going to other entities in Washtenaw County. So the largest portion of your tax dollars is actually going to education at almost 53 cents for every dollar of taxes that you pay on your property. The other entities within the county that get a portion of your tax dollars are Washtenaw County itself, the Ann Arbor Area Transportation Authority, the library, and the DDA. So this slide here shows the revenue by the type of revenue that we receive within the city. So the two largest sources overall for the city are going to be our taxes and our charges for services, which are things like our utility fees, our parks and rec fees, and things of that nature. Other things in here are some fines and forfeits, which would be largely like parking tickets and other types of traffic enforcement tickets that you might receive. Operating transfers in accounts for us transferring money from one fund to another. We receive investment income. We do invest our dollars as we can to try and generate some income from that. And also sometimes we do sell bonds to finance projects, and that can account for revenue in any given year. So with all that revenue, what are we spending it on? So we are spending our revenue on things such as wages and benefits, utility costs to keep the city facilities open, vehicle costs for our city fleet vehicles. So even things like those garbage trucks that you see and the plow trucks, those are all costs related to vehicles that we would have. We have to maintain our buildings, keep them in good repair. We have materials and supplies. We have debt payments, capital items. We also have pension costs and retiree health care that all have to be covered with the limited revenue that we do receive. So this slide here shows our expenses by service area for our current fiscal year. So we have a $470 million budget across all the funds for all of the city services that we provide. And the largest slice of this pie is public services at almost $171 million. And that includes the expenses for things like public works, the wastewater treatment plant, the water treatment plant, engineering, systems planning, road maintenance, and things of that nature. The next biggest slice of the pie here, or one of the next biggest slices of the pie here, is our safety services area at almost $50 million. And so that is going to be police and fire and the court in that bucket. And then we also have the city administrator service area, which is comprised of like our human resources, our clerk's office, our communications office, safety, and our fleet and facilities. We have also in here community services, which is parks and rec, community development, building and rental, and the planning unit. And then we also have in here some various other ones, which are like the mayor's office, the attorney's office, things that don't fit neatly in these other categories. We have the DDA, and we have our pension system, and of course we have finance, which is all of us talking to you this evening. So now that we've talked about the revenues and expenses that we get at the city, it's good to talk about the different funds to where that money comes in and where it is spent. So a fund is a separate fiscal and accounting entity that we use to segregate resources that are related to a specific activity. And fund accounting is unique to the public sector. It does require separate self-balancing accounting entries to track all of the revenues and expenditures coming into that fund. Funds can be created for various reasons, and they're separated into fund types, which you see here on the screen. Those fund types dictate the accounting rules that apply to that fund. So the general fund is the city's main operating fund and probably the one that is most well known. We then also have our debt service fund, which is used to pay for the annual principal and interest payments on any outstanding bond debt that we may have. We have our enterprise funds, which are used for activities where the city is selling a service or product. So this would include water, sewer, and solid waste. We have special revenue funds, which are used to legally separate activities such as millages that you have on your property taxes and state funding that we may receive. We have capital project funds, which are money that are set aside for the construction of some sort of asset like a building or a road. And we have our trust and agency funds, which we use for reporting assets that we have to hold in a trustee or agency capacity for others, and they can't be used to support the city's own programs. And the two trust funds that we have are our pension trust fund and our retiree health care trust fund, otherwise known as the VEBA trust fund. So we do have over 50 funds in total in the city. So I'm just going to take a minute to highlight the general fund because it is the one that most people talk about and want to know about. So on this slide, I have the breakout for the different types of revenues that come into the general fund specifically. And we have a revenue budget for our current fiscal year of $118 million in the general fund. The largest portion of this revenue that's coming in here is from property taxes at nearly $65 million. And if you're looking at your property tax bill, this is going to be the operating levy, the benefits levy, and the Ann Arbor Area Transportation Authority levy on those bills. The next largest portion of revenue that we receive in the general fund is intra-governmental revenue, which is $18 million nearly. This is revenue that is actually received by the general fund from other city funds for services that are rendered to those funds by general fund departments. We also have in here a revenue from the state, which is coming into the intergovernmental revenue category. We get investment income in here, and we have fines and forfeits revenue in here. So parking tickets come in here, and other traffic related ticket revenue is in here. We have also charges for services at almost $10 million there. Those are for the fees from places such as parks and recreation, when you visit facilities like our pool and our ice rinks. And then we also have licenses, permits, and registration revenue coming in, which includes things like jog licenses in that category, not entirely, but there's a handful of things that are in that category. And then there's a use of fund balance here for this current fiscal year, which means we're pulling out of our savings account in this fund to balance this fund because we were short on the revenue for things that we needed to do for the current fiscal year. So on this slide then, we are showing the general fund expenses. So what are we spending all of that incoming revenue on? And in the general fund, the biggest chunk of the pie just in the general fund is safety services, which is police and fire. They are almost $49 million here in this pie chart. We also have our community services area at almost $18 million. So building and planning and parks and rec falls in there. Financial services is pretty largely in the general fund. Public services is a huge chunk of the city, but actually has very small amounts of money within the general fund. And we have, of course, the city administrator area, the attorney's office, mayor, council in here, along with some debt service that the general fund has to pay. We transfer your tax dollars that you're paying for Ann Arbor Area Transportation Authority over to them, and any other miscellaneous transfers that we have. And of course, can't forget the 15th District Court as well. So with that, let's talk about fund balance first, and then I'll stop for a few questions if there's any out there. So since we talked about the various funds and the different fund types, we do also have a thing out there called fund balance. Fund balance is an accumulation of our revenues minus our expenditures. And every fund that we maintain has some sort of fund balance. And fund balance is essentially the city's savings account for the future. And that fund balance can be used for purposes determined by council, or if we have an emergent unplanned need that arises. So we do have several types of fund balance. Those include non-spendable, which includes amounts that either can't be spent because they aren't in a spendable form, or there are legal or contractual requirements that keep them from being spent. A restricted fund balance means that this money can only be used to pay creditors, or it has some other restricted use by law. So our restricted fund balances are largely for things like road maintenance and repair, culture and recreation related to like our parks system, law enforcement, and debt service payments. We also have committed fund balance, which can only be used for a specific purpose based on constraints imposed by formal actions of the government. And we have assigned fund balance, which are monies that are intended for a specific purpose, but they aren't necessarily restricted or committed in that sense. But we assign them on our books for a purpose that we determine they need to be assigned for. And finally, we have unassigned fund balance, which is money that is not in any of the other categories. It's not restricted, it's not committed, it's not assigned. We do only find this in the general fund within the city. And then next, I just have a chart here that shows you by percentage how our fund balance breaks out for the city. So this is as of June 30th, 2021, which was the end of our last fiscal year, and reflects our most recent audit for our accounting. So very little is actually non-spendable or committed, only 2% in each of those two categories. We have restricted at 63%, and we have assigned at 15%, and unassigned is at 18%. Our unassigned fund balance is entirely in the general fund, and we actually have a whole policy that says we will maintain a fund balance in the general fund that runs between 15 and 20% of general fund expenditures. And that if we fall below that 15% threshold, then council actually has to approve and adopt a plan to restore the fund balance within whatever time period they specify. Currently, you can see we are within that 15 to 20% range at 18%. So we don't need an action plan to bring fund balance within the range. So I'm going to stop right there, and we'll see if there's any questions out there that we can answer before I move on to the budget process itself.
Yes.
Mike, do we have any questions?
We do. We have about 6. So
All right.
the first question is, do you have an organizational chart? And I didn't see one on our website. It kind of lists out the different things. I will say that on our last slide, we have our contact information. But do we have something that would resemble an org, maybe in the financial, finance?
In the budget book, I do have an org chart in there. If you go out to the city's website and find the budget book, you can find it in there.
Okay.
If you were interested in it, you are more than welcome to email me for it, and I can send that out just by itself if you don't want to hunt through the budget book.
Yes. So, and like I said, all of our contact information's on that last slide. So feel free to reach out, or pretty much if you Google City of Ann Arbor, budget book, it's gonna be one of the first sites that come up. So I have a question from Evan that says, why are those not reported separately, meaning fire and police? So why do we report those two entities together?
We report them together because they fall under the category of safety services. So we like to roll them up within that category, just in the same way that financial services is just a category, but it's comprised of like accounting and procurement and budget and treasury, right? Safety services for the city is comprised of those two entities.
Question from Donald. What is in public services?
Public services has a lot going on. The department names that they have are Public Works, Engineering, we have the water treatment plant, wastewater treatment plant, and systems planning. Much of what's done in Public Works is related to the roads though, right? All of the road maintenance and repair, that budget falls to public services. We do run a water plant and a wastewater plant, so that all also falls within that category. Engineering is in there, right? So that also goes with roadways. They are the ones who determine what roads need to be fixed and when, and keep that all in line for us. Public Works itself is going to have, your recycle trucks and your garbage trucks that come out and collect those from the curb are all in that Public Works category.
James would like to know if these slides will be available for participants. Can you make the presentation available?
Sarah, are you making them available afterwards?
If you want to send it to me, I can absolutely make it available. And also this recording will be available for everyone.
Great. I'll make sure to send this to Sarah after tonight's presentation so she can post that for you all.
Great. I got 3 more questions. You mentioned state shared revenue. What is the source of these state funds? Does this change much from year to year? And do they have a dedicated purpose?
So state shared revenue, it's collected at the state level and it's actually coming from the sales tax that you pay. So that 6% you pay every time you go to the store and buy something that is taxable goes into that pot of money. And then the state apportions that out to all the local units. They have, I believe, probably quite a complicated formula to figure that out. From our side, though, the money that we receive from that is relatively consistent year to year, even through the pandemic. So we really did not even see a loss in that revenue during the pandemic. People just simply switched to buying things online instead of buying them at the store, but sales tax was still paid and went into the state coffers, and they were then distributed to us. Was there one other part that I missed?
Yeah. So what can we do with that money? Is there restricted?
There is no restrictions on that. It goes right into the general fund. And we can spend that on whatever we need. So we can wages, police, fire, roads, whatever we need, we can spend it on.
Great. Next question from Donald. Is there direct payments to the Downtown Development Authority, or is that their revenue from the TIF, the tax incentivized financing? What reserves does the city have for emergencies? So I guess there's 2 questions there.
Do you want to take the DDA parts? Do you know more about the tax bills?
So there are direct payments to the DDA. We collect, it's called, I call it tax capture, right? So there are certain millages that I can't rattle off the top of my head. Hello?
We can hear you.
Oh, okay. My computer just told me my AirPods were connected. Sorry. So the DDA gets tax revenue from us. They also derive a large portion of their revenue from the parking system. So they collect all of the parking meter. When you pay on a meter, park in a parking structure, that is their revenue as well. Correct me if I'm wrong, Kim, but they pay a percentage of that, something like 20% to the city.
Yes, that's correct.
As basically a lease payment for those parking spaces and those parking structures. How about the reserves for city emergencies? You want to talk about that, Kim?
Yeah, so we do. That's that fund balance that we just talked about. And every fund does have some sort of fund balance, and it is certainly there within each fund for emergencies as needed. In the general fund, our fund balance is unassigned and it's unrestricted. So any emergency that may come up that would be within the realm of the general fund could be paid for using that fund balance. For example, though, if it was related to a roadway, we may look at the local or major street fund balance to fund something like that. If it wasn't, if it was an emergent need to fix a road that wasn't necessarily in the current year plan, they could pull from that fund balance to do something of that nature.
Great. The last question has to do with the dollar bill graph. Are you able to go back to the dollar bill graph real quick? I think I'm going to be probably the person to answer this one, but while you're going back there, I'll read it. The dollar bill graph showed several services and government entities that are local to Ann Arbor, but not part of the city of Ann Arbor budget, if I understand it correctly. When and where is it decided what portion of taxes go to these entities? So this whole graph here is basically showing you all of the millages. If you had your tax bill in front of you, you would see a number of millages listed there in the itemized section, kind of off to the right near the top right side. Each one of those belongs to a taxing authority. So some of the authority to create those taxes comes from statutory laws, state of Michigan laws, local units, there's certain things that are written into our statutes, our ordinances, and other types of laws that require them to be charged. Other parts of them are voted. So as you see, whenever you go into the ballot box and you vote on your ballot for different millages, you'll see those will all add up into a certain section. So if you see Ann Arbor Public Schools, 27.8%. That includes a school operating tax, a supplemental tax. They have a sinking fund, which is to help them keep their buildings up, and then they have a debt fund. That's to help them pay their debt. State education tax that belongs to the state of Michigan, community college, et cetera. So each one of these is based largely on what has been passed through referendums, through millage elections in the past. Some of their millages are designed by statutory laws that have been passed, but a good portion of them are usually voted on by the public. So WISD is Washtenaw Intermediate School District. And so we're kind of grouping them based on what your use is. So you have 52% is education, 11.6% is Washtenaw County. That there's some parks taxes in there, and things of that nature. So all of these different entities, when you pay taxes to the city of Ann Arbor, 23.5% of that stays with the city of Ann Arbor. All of the rest of this go to these individual taxing authorities to help fund their operations. So that's the dollar bill graph. And someone just asked, what is the SMART zone? The SMART zone is a local development finance authority. And off the top of my head, I'm not sure. Basically, they collect from a couple of different millages, but I don't involve myself directly with them. Kim, do you have a kind of a general overview of what they do?
I'm not too involved with that part either. We do, it's to support like business development and business growth within the city.
Yeah.
Sort of like a business incubator, so to speak.
Yes.
And we flow, the money flows out to Ann Arbor Spark
Yep. That sounds
for the
about right.
funding.
Yeah, thank you
Yep.
for that. I was kind of drawing a blank on that one. The last question we have, and we'll move on, is I am a former federal government employee. Question is, how many restrictions of spending funds do you have?
Well, we have over 50 funds, and each one, has its own restrictions. The only one that is relatively, I would say, unrestricted, right, it would be the general fund. We have, for example, 2 road funds, the local roads and the major streets funds. So those are restricted for road maintenance and repair. We, as another example, we have also internal service funds, such as the Information Technology Fund. So that is restricted to information technology related items and personnel for the city. We also have like our pension trust fund, that's in its own fund, right? So that is restricted specifically to make pension payments and fund our future liability on those pension payments, I should say. So really every fund has some sort of restriction on it based on what the fund is meant to do.
Right. And let me ask you if you think this is a fair analogy, but it's kind of like a department, or not a department store, but like a shopping mall. Every fund is its own store, and it has its own set of rules on what you can do with the money, how much of it you're supposed to save versus spend. Like the water funds, all of the water rates and everything that go into those funds as revenue, and every dollar that's in there can only be spent on water, on water, on the water system itself, or debt from the
Yes.
water system, things like that.
Yes.
All right,
that's
we're caught up.
a great analogy. All right, perfect. So we'll move on then to the budget development. If my button would show up, there we go. All right. So as we get into talking about the budget, first, let's define what the budget is. So forming a budget, and by definition, it involves activities for the development, the implementation, and evaluation of our plan to provide those services to all of our citizens within the city, right? Our budget is going to serve as our financial plan or our roadmap for every fiscal year. So we allocate our estimated revenues that can be used for our estimated expenditures. And so by doing that, we are working towards the mission of helping city administration and city council make informed decisions about how to provide all of the services that citizens want to see within the budget. And although our budget is only adopted 1 year at a time, it does take into account the long-term implications of when we add something to the budget, or if we reduce something from the budget, from both a monetary and a service delivery perspective. And the budget is also driven by the goals and priorities that are set by the city administration and by council. So with that, every year when we develop our budget, we have to forecast all of the revenues that we anticipate that we are going to receive in the upcoming year, and all of the expenditures that we think we're going to incur in that next year. Now, by state law, the city's budget has to be balanced, so our revenues have to equal our estimated expenditures. We'll run a surplus when revenues are greater than our spending, but conversely, we'll have a gap that we're projecting if spending is expected to exceed revenues. And we'll adjust the revenue and spending plans as needed in order to balance the budget. Now, per city charter, our city council can only adopt a budget for one fiscal year. We always adopt the budget for the upcoming fiscal year at the second council meeting in May. So that will be coming up here in just a couple of months. The city's fiscal year then begins on July 1st and it ends on June 30th of the following year. So every year, the mayor, council, city administrator, and city staff, we all work together to develop that budget. So while the budget's being drafted, we have key stakeholders who are making decisions on how to utilize the limited revenues that we do receive in order to maximize and provide the greatest benefits for our citizens. And our budget serves as an outline for how we will spend those revenues in order to maintain and improve the city. So the mayor, council, city administrator, any interested citizens or businesses, they all serve as participants in the creation and execution of this budget. And our budget isn't just an accounting document, it is a management and planning tool, because we are limited by the amount of resources that we do have available in terms of revenue. The budget does aid our city staff and council in determining which objectives have the highest priority and will produce the greatest positive impact within the community. So every other year, we develop a 2-year budget plan, where the first year of the plan is what will be adopted for the upcoming fiscal year, and the budget for the year after that is the plan, but it's not adopted at the time because we can only adopt 1 year at a time. And then during the second year of that 2-year cycle, we tweak the plan that we had laid out in the prior year as needed, but large wholesale changes are generally not made during the second year. So currently we're in fiscal 22, and our upcoming budget for fiscal 23 is the second year of the 2-year cycle. And this slide here shows how that whole cycle works. So every fall is when the budget development process kicks off in earnest. So the things that we start to do to actually develop the budget include developing things like our internal service rates for the next fiscal year. We determine the cost for wages and benefits for the next fiscal year. And then once we have all of that information finalized, we create what we call as a target for each service unit or department. And that target provides the overall total dollar amount that we are anticipating that is going to be needed by each department for all of their expenses, including all wages, benefits, utilities, vehicles, materials, supplies, and that sort of thing. And then the service units or departments are then asked to create an impact sheet for any expenses that they plan on that they think they will have or plan on having in the next fiscal year that don't fit within that target number for their department. And while they're doing that, they're also developing their goals for the next fiscal year, which are also incorporated into the budget. So once we have all of that information gathered and costs estimated, we prepare a rough draft of the budget. And then we record, this year, which was new, we did video recordings for City Council to present the upcoming budget needs for each service unit. These have been posted in February and March of this year. Several of them are posted now out on the city's CTN YouTube channel if you want to view them. And I do believe there are another 1 or 2 more to come that will be posted in the coming weeks. So you are welcome to watch those videos if you'd like to learn more about what's involved in the upcoming budget year. So then once those videos are completed, we actually put together a draft budget that we give to council in April of every year for their review. So that time, council will then provide staff with questions and any suggestions for the budget. And then at the first meeting of May, council meeting, I should say, there is a public hearing on the budget where the public can attend the meeting and make comments on what is in that budget document for council's consideration. And then finally, the budget's adopted at the second meeting of council in May of every year. The public can also provide comment at that time as well. And city council on that evening can choose to make additional amendments to the budget during the meeting that are incorporated into the budget upon their adoption of the budget at the end of the evening. And then the very final step in the process, once council has adopted the budget, is to actually implement the budget for the upcoming fiscal year, which is going to begin on July 1st, and publish our budget book. And my final slide here on the budget, this is just a calendar of the steps in the budget process. You can see when we do certain things within the year regarding budgeting and planning for that. So the official kickoff to the budget season is in the fall, but we do some pre-planning work that gets going in July regarding our long-term financial plans and our capital improvement plan. And that planning really helps to drive a lot of the rest of the budget process once we actually kick it off. And we, of course, do financial reporting all throughout the year. And if anyone's interested in looking further at the actual budget or the budget book, it is out on our website. If you Google it, like Mike said earlier, it should come right up for you. And with that, I am at the end of my section. So Mike, are there any questions on the budget in the queue?
Yes, there are. There was a couple questions that you might have answered as you went along because they were a little bit earlier on. But let's ask them anyway. So
All right.
Richard said, I thought from last week's easy for me to say. I thought from last week's meeting that the budget was approved for 2 years.
No, we only approve, we can only adopt the budget 1 year at a time. We do a 2-year planning cycle every other year. So when they adopted the fiscal year 22 budget, There was also a plan presented to council for fiscal 23, but they did not actually adopt fiscal 23 at that time because legally they can only adopt 1 year at a time.
The next question from Will, and the final question I have right now is, wouldn't a rolling budget be better?
Well, I believe that would probably be quite hard and complicated to keep track of for many people. There would be a lot of moving parts to that, and there are a lot of changes sometimes year over year, or even, you know, every other year that need to be incorporated. And I think a rolling budget wouldn't really facilitate that very well.
And I
But
believe
that is also the purpose of fund balance too. If you don't spend all the money, it rolls back in and we can pull it forward as needed.
right. So you, a department or a area that's responsible for their budget could choose to spend fund balance as it's legally allowed, provided council approves that action.
Yes, they
Um,
could.
You know, I'll pick on one that I actually know about, like the Elizabeth Dean Fund, which is a little fund that sits out there and it collects interest on treasuries. And the interest that is earned on the 2 million that sits in there goes towards planting trees. You'll see signs around town that says these trees are provided by the Elizabeth Dean Fund. When they don't spend their money every year, and this is as simple as a fund can get, right? Because all they do is plant trees. And so when they don't spend all of their money, all the interest that we've earned on investments, that money goes into fund balance. And so they've accrued a decent fund balance over time. So that committee can meet and ask for council to pass a budget where they may spend more than the money that they bring in a particular year because they have this fund balance. The whole idea is that, you know, if there was going to be a really great growing season and they wanted to plant a bunch of trees, then that's something they can do. And that's just a very basic way of looking at it. So, and I wanted to also mention that I believe budgets are statutorily mandated that we have to approve them. I think there's some state laws that would prevent us from doing anything other than what we're doing right now. City charter requires us to do one a year, and state law, we have to file these budgets with the state. If they're not balanced, we have to provide additional reporting and plans on how we plan to get in balance.
Yes.
And so there's other requirements that make us do the budget the way that we do it now.
Yes, that is
Okay.
very true.
Good. Correct me. I always say correct me when I'm wrong. So I'm glad I wasn't wrong on that one.
You were not.
All right. So the next few slides are with our accounting services manager, our newest member of the team, Tammy Cook.
Thanks, Mike and Kim. Hello, good evening, everybody. I'm Tammy Cook, the Accounting Services Manager. And unlike Kim, I've been here a whopping 6 weeks. So I'll do my best to kind of explain my area and what my team does. And hopefully as a group, we can answer any questions that might come up. Well, first of all, we handle all the accounts payable for the city. And that's quite a bit, as you can imagine. We actually processed over 28,000 invoices last year. And we issue those payments out to vendors each and every week. So it's an awful lot of work that the team handles. We maintain the vendor files and issue 1099s, which are simply informational returns for non-employee services that we've received in excess of $600. And we issued about 100 of those this past year, and that's pretty typical for the years. We also cover escheatments to the state of Michigan. So those are uncashed checks. We do them annually. These are deemed unclaimed property by the state, and the accounting team does their due diligence. We reach out to parties who have encashed checks, follow up with them, try to get repayments issued. But at the end of the day, there are always some that you simply cannot track down the owner of, or they simply cannot cash it for whatever reason. Those are remitted to the state of Michigan. And we typically do 100 to 150 of those each year. We also cover the accounts receivable area. So we invoice for a whole variety of things. Many invoices go out each week. These things would be police and fire false alarms, housing inspections, when property is damaged in accidents, like if somebody hits a guardrail or a light pole, we'll bill those out. We also do some billing for overtime for police officers at football and basketball games, and that sort of thing. We also handle bank reconciliations. So these are really important that they're done timely. So we ensure that transactions at the bank are recorded in the ledger and vice versa. And this also acts as an internal control to make sure that no inappropriate activity. It helps prevent fraudulent activity between the departments and that sort of thing. And this is done each month. We reconcile the 21 different bank accounts. Moving on to the annual audit. So we engage an independent audit firm, and their task is to simply form an opinion on our financial statements as to whether or not they reasonably reflect our financial position. And that sounds pretty easy, but this is actually a super time and labor intensive process. While the audit itself begins in June, we actually start the process, and it's an ongoing process of reviewing transactions and accounts for proper classification and recording. It's something that happens every single day. I look at very many accounts and journal entries and kind of review everything, and the team does as well. As the audit approaches, we begin preparing work papers to give to the auditors. These help substantiate the amounts and calculations that are in various accounts, and basically double check ourselves before the auditors get there and find something instead of us. The audit leads up to the issuance of the annual comprehensive financial report and the single audit in October. And those are also on that same website that Kim had mentioned, where the budget document is housed. You can see it all there. When these reports are issued, the auditor will file a auditing procedure report with the state of Michigan. This indicates our compliance with the legal requirement to have an annual audit. Staff then will file other required reports, which include the CBTRS program report, and we publish performance dashboard out there for residents to view. We also do a local unit fiscal report where the audited information is entered into the state system in a way that they can aggregate data and kind of compare it across local units throughout the state. And we'll also do some retirement system reports that basically let folks know, let the state know our funded status of our pension and post-employment benefit programs. And the qualifying statement needs to be submitted that allows us to issue debt in the future. A lot. And our final item that we cover is payroll. So we work closely with human resources to ensure that people are paid properly, that we are properly implementing all the things that are happening in the various union contracts, and as they change over time, that we're calculating benefits properly for each different group and unit. We ensure compliance with required deductions like union dues, garnishments, child support payments, and that sort of thing. There are more than 700 FTEs, but we also have a lot of temporary and part-time staffers. So the biweekly payroll run, as you can imagine, is a great deal of activity. Tons of employee changes and questions come up each week, so it keeps our payroll folks extremely busy. We also file the 941s quarterly with the IRS. So this is where we're reporting income, Medicare, and Social Security taxes that were withheld from employees, and then also reconciling the share that us as the employer is paying to them. And then finally, to wrap up the year, we'll issue W-2s for all employees. I know that was an awful lot. Do we have any questions to respond to?
We got one question right at the end of your presentation, and I kind of like this question. Somebody's paying attention, but if we have over 50 funds, why do we only have 21 bank accounts?
That is a great question. And Mike, I know that I can count on you for assistance with this one as the treasurer. But from my perspective, there are certain times when you absolutely have to have a separate bank account. And our accounting in the various funds, in a lot of ways, we are doing that for statutory reasons where it really isn't necessary to have a totally separate bank account necessarily. We just need to account for it separately. And Mike, I'll let you follow up on that.
Yeah, so we only have 21 bank accounts because the banking system that's kind of attached to these, actually, how many funds do we have? It's like 100 and something, isn't it? No, it's only 50 something.
It's just, yeah, it's over 50.
Oh. All right, I'm trying to make it too big. I'm sorry.
You are.
So what we have is a pooled cash concept. And what pooled cash is that everyone is basically participating. All of these 50 funds participate in the same set of bank accounts, with the exceptions that Tammy mentioned, our tax account. So when you make a tax payment to the city of Ann Arbor, we physically place that check in a separate bank account. So one of the things if a customer service person, if you ever come in and you want to pay your water bill and your tax bill at the same time, and we might kindly ask you for 2 separate checks and you wonder why, It's because we're physically putting your tax money in one account, because that account, we have to collect all of that money. And as we saw back on the other slide, only 24% of that money stays in the city. The rest of it has to go to the county, the state, the schools, the library, et cetera. So we keep all of that in a segregated bank account. Debt funds sometimes require us to have separate accounts to set aside some funds to pay our debt payments. So that's why it ends up working out to be 21 accounts. We separate it's basically separated a lot by function. So we have a main depository account, we have an investment account, we have accounts payable account. So the account that we're writing checks out of and has our routing and account number on there, that's not the account we deposit and hold our money in. And as you know, with fraud and identity theft and everything else going on, it's good to have those two things separate. So we have those things separate. I think that did I give a good enough answer for that one? We good? Okay. Next up on our list is our purchasing manager, Colin Spencer.
Hello, good evening, everybody. I'm Colin Spencer, the purchasing manager. I'm going to walk you through some of the ways at a very high level that city purchasing assists city units in their missions. Purchasing has two core services, compliance and guidance. Compliance, this means that city purchasing ensures that city spends public funds in a way that follows the purchasing rules set forth by federal or state law, city charter, city code, and various administrative policies and procedures. Guidance, purchasing assists city staff with how to spend public funds by providing general direction on what the ideal method of procurement, Pcard, informal quotes, formal solicitations should be used based on what is needed, what it costs, along with what is required internally for each purchase. Externally, purchasing helps with supporting vendors or service providers with fielding inquiries around how to do business with the city. Some of the things that I touch regularly include formal solicitations. So this is our invitation to bid and request for proposal process. This involves the creation, consultation, publication, and general administration of the city's formal procurement solicitation process. The city typically publishes over 80 formal solicitations each fiscal year, which means we get a lot of questions on the content of those bids and proposals. Purchase order processing. So purchasing is also responsible for review and approval of all purchase orders issued while ensuring that appropriate documentation is provided, including quotes or competition, our required forms like our conflict of interest and living wages, council resolutions, agreements, etc. We issue over 900 POs. We issued over 900 POs last fiscal year. The Pcard program, so this is the purchasing card program. Purchasing is responsible for the issuance and closure of Pcards along with issues that happen before or during the purchase. We have currently just shy of 130 active Pcards in the program. Not only do I work with what's coming into the city, I also work with what's going out. So surplus property, purchasing is responsible for assisting in the disposal of tangible property no longer in use or needed by the city. This is typically done through an eBay style public auction. This is admittedly not a big part of what purchasing does, but it's a function worth mentioning since awareness is low. Next slide, please. All right, let's dig a little deeper into how the city spends public funds with three commonly used options based on value. Purchases 3,000 or less can be handled via the Pcard or direct invoice efficiently with a quick transaction. The city gets what they need, the merchant is paid, and everyone moves on. Above 3,000, we enter the realm of purchase orders and quotes, where we informally state what we want, send it to at least 3 likely sources, ideally more, and they provide a quote or price. Above 25,000, we're looking into issuing our own formal solicitation, a bid or proposal. And if the purchase will exceed 75,000, council approval is required. Unit area staff develop the scope, bid list, particular specific of what they need, and we start the formal process. Of course, there can be exceptions based on what and how much we're looking to buy, and there's nuances to every purchase, but generally speaking, these are the 3 primary options I will look to and suggest first when spending public funds. Challenges. So, yeah, it's with a greater focus these days on lost revenue and deficits and everyone tightening up their purse strings a bit, I'm expecting internally and externally a greater interest in the services that purchasing can provide. More questions, more novices or new people, new bidders, just more volume. Being a unit of one, a greater demand could become a significant and constant strain. And while I do currently have options available to me for assistance, it's a potential challenge that I feel worth mentioning. Just to sum up, city purchasing is committed to an equitable, impartial, and transparent operation that is easy to work with and available to provide prompt guidance and assistance. I am actively working to prove through outstanding service that public purchasing should not be viewed as simply an obstacle or red tape to overcome, but more as a partner city units look forward to working with. Questions?
Yes. So Richard had a question and you kind of answered it, but I think it's still worth asking because
Sure.
I think we should talk a little bit about what is the dollar limit on Pcards? So on your slide, you had the $3,000.
Yep. So purchases.
Yeah.
Yep, purchases on Pcards are capped at $3,000. We have a limitation set at $3,000. So individual purchases on the Pcard cannot exceed $3,000.
Yeah, but we also can set lower limits on people's individual cards.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Yep.
yeah,
we
You
can
just
set.
said-
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh,
Kim, go ahead.
that $3,000 limit on a Pcard is because that would be the threshold for a purchase order, right?
Correct. And that's also, I believe, the city's limit for an asset. I could
Right.
be wrong, I believe. So
right. So I just want to add to that we can set limits and do set limits on individual purchasing cards. If someone has
absolutely.
if a staff member has a need to charge up to $3,000, then they may have a $3,000 limit. If someone's just doing a lot of small purchases, then we may set their limit at a lower amount. Of course, this is not only to help them out, but it's also to protect in case that card is lost or stolen.
Certainly.
That has generated a lot of other questions, so you're not going anywhere yet, Colin. What is the difference between, and I need the answer to this as well since I work here, what is the difference between ITB and RFP in formal solicitation?
So the ITB process is primarily based on price. The RFP process is based on everything but price, or primarily based on everything but price. The RFP allows us to do a formal evaluation on items that are not just price specific.
Right. Susan has a question that says, can Colin please clarify again the role of the $25,000 threshold for purchases and the $75,000 threshold?
So the $25,000 threshold is the limit in which we need to issue a formal solicitation. The $75,000 threshold is when council needs to approve of that purchase.
Perfect. James said, sorry, regarding definition of terms, what is an ITB? That is an invitation to bid.
Mike's got it.
All right. And Peter is asking or confirming, did I understand you to say that purchasing is a one-person department?
Yes, I am the only person serving in a designated public procurement role for the city of Ann Arbor currently. It is interesting to note that the Ann Arbor Area Transportation Authority has at least 2 folks in their purchasing department, and they have a significantly smaller spend than we do. But yes, I am all of them.
Colin is worth at least 2 or 3 people in my mind.
Thank you, Mike.
No
Very nice.
problem, Colin. Moving on to our assessing department and Jerry Markey. Oh, Peter would like to pray for your health. Colin.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
All right, Jerry, it's all you.
All right, it's all me. Hey, good evening. Appreciate allowing me to spend time with you this evening. As an introduction, I'm Jerry Markey. I currently serve as your city assessor. The duties and responsibilities of the assessing office, first and foremost, is to inventory and track all property within the city that's either taxable and exempt. Our function also is to establish assessed values and taxable values for all of the taxable property throughout the city. We have roughly 37,000 parcels of real and personal property throughout the city. 1,400 of those are exempt parcels. 30,700 are real in nature, mostly residential. And then we have a commercial class and an industrial class. As you see on the slide, 65% of the taxable value of the city is residential. 34% of the taxable value is the commercial property, and 1% is industrial. On the personal property side, we have just under 5,000 personal property parcels. 72% of those of the taxable value is commercial business personal property. 5% is industrial, and 23% is utility personal property. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, 1,400 parcels are exempt. Those would be owned by the city of Ann Arbor schools, University of Michigan, churches, the state of Michigan, parks, a variety of tax-exempt entities are part of the 1,400 parcels within the city of Ann Arbor. One of our other functions is to value new construction that occurs annually throughout the city, and also to monitor market activity of houses that have sold and properties that have sold, to do our market value adjustments on an annual basis that we then use to establish assessed values and establish the taxable values for property taxes. We have different types of tax appeals that my office handles. At the local level, it's called the March Board of Review, which will be taking place this month, March 21st through March 24th. Most residents received an assessment change notice from the city of Ann Arbor last week, indicating what their assessed value is for their property, and also what their taxable value is for their property. And taxpayers have the right to appeal any value that's been established by the city of Ann Arbor. Residents, if they're a residential property, must first appeal at the local level, the March Board of Review. Commercial businesses and industrial can bypass the local level and appeal directly to the state Michigan Tax Tribunal by May 31st. The third item that we deal with on a tax level is with the State Tax Commission, and it's limited mostly to identifying property that has been improperly reported on the roll. If we discover property that should be assessed that is not, we can petition the state to have those properties put on the assessment roll. And the reverse is also true. If we discover property that has been assessed and is no longer taxable, we petition the state to have those parcels removed from the assessment roll. Our office also deals with poverty exemptions and veteran exemptions. I want to cover the veteran exemptions first and then move back to the poverty. But the veteran exemption, this is a law that was passed in 2014. And the way that statute is written is if a veteran is 100% unemployable or 100% disabled due to a war-related injury, they are exempt from property taxes. Veterans apply annually for the exemption. On the poverty side of the exemption, City Council annually passes a resolution establishing poverty levels for residential property owners that own and occupy their principal residence. If they have income levels that are below the poverty level established by City Council, the taxpayer is eligible for a reduction in property taxes. The levels are 220% of the federal poverty level was established by City Council. So what this means basically is the federal poverty level for a one-person household is $12,880. The City of Ann Arbor poverty level for a single person is $28,336. So if you have income, fixed income, typically that is under $28,336, and you own and occupy your house as your primary residence, you would qualify for a reduction in property taxes due to poverty. Taxpayers who do qualify are required to file with the City of Ann Arbor Assessor's Office an exemption form. And then the Board of Review, which meets in March, July, and December, will review the poverty exemption, and if the taxpayer qualifies, will grant a reduction in their taxable value, which will then result in a reduction in property taxes. Our office also works with what we call the PRE, the Principal Resident Exemption. And that is for the property owner that owns and occupies their house as their primary resident is eligible for a portion of the school operating taxes to be exempt from the summer and winter tax bill. Our office handles property divisions and property combinations that have been requested by the property owners. We maintain legal descriptions of property throughout the city. And we work with the IT department to map all of the property within the City of Ann Arbor. One of our more important functions that we work with our CFO, Marty Prashan, and Kim Bosselmeyer in the finance area is the Headley reduction fraction. What we have to determine is, does the millage rate for the City of Ann Arbor require a rollback due to the Headley Amendment that was passed in the early 1970s? And the way Headley works in a layman's thought is a city or a local taxing jurisdiction cannot collect any more revenue in the current year than they did in the prior year, except for new construction and the rate of inflation. So that's a process that my office calculates with Kim and Marty, and we develop the head reduction fraction to see if our millage rates need to be reduced. Regarding the millage rate itself, to be on the following slide, a mill, again, just put it into layman's perspective, 1 mill is equal to $1 in tax for each $1,000 of taxable value. The city in 2021 levied 16.8215 mills. So for each $1,000 of taxable value, the city collects $16.82 roughly in property tax. Part of the taxable value portion was also modified in 1994 with Proposal A. And this was a law that was passed and it states that a individual property tax cannot increase any more than the rate of inflation on an annual basis, unless they added something new to the rule. They built a garage that wasn't there before. They added a bathroom. They added a second story to their house that was not on the tax roll before. That is new taxable, and that will increase their property taxes beyond the rate of inflation. Another item that also occurred in 1994 with Proposal A was what we refer to as uncapping. And what this identifies is when a property transfers ownership, the year following the sale, the taxable value will change and uncap and become the same value as the current assessed value. Property owners that bought a house in 2021, for example, will see a change in their taxable value, possibly greater than the rate of inflation due to the uncapping that occurred when the taxable value changed and became the same value as the assessed value. There are certain sales that do not uncap. Those are mostly related to blood affinity. The way the state of Michigan addresses it is if you have a first blood affinity, meaning parents transferring to their children, grandparents to grandchildren, parents to adopted children, those transfers of ownership do not cause an uncapping of taxable value. However, if an aunt were to transfer their property to their niece or nephew, that is not called a first blood affinity, and those transfers do cause an uncapping of taxable value the following year. Thank you very much. I'll take whatever questions you have and see what we can answer them for you.
All right. First question for you. Do you consider an apartment building to be commercial or residential?
An apartment building, if it's more than four, what we call a fourplex, 4 units, would be considered commercial. And most of our, for example, our large student housing properties, the Orion properties on State Street, those are larger commercial properties, and those are commercial property.
All right. Donald asks, what is an example of a personal property parcel, and wouldn't all parcels be real property?
Good question and a fair question. So personal property, we look at it as something that can be taken away, like tables and chairs, computers. Those are personal property in nature and are taxable as an asset to the business owner.
Right.
And we're going to digress there for a moment. There's a law that was passed for the small business property owners. If they have assets that are under $80,000 worth of depreciated true cash value, they can file an exemption form with the assessor's office to be exempt from personal property tax. But again, personal property is something that is more machinery and equipment, furniture and fixtures, computers, related type of personal. On the real property side, if I understood the question, we look at real property as the bricks and mortar, something that is permanently attached to the ground. It would be real property in nature.
Good answer. Thank you. The next question from Liz, are poverty exemptions and veterans exemptions inaccessible to renters?
Yes, they are not eligible for renters. The reason being is to qualify for the veteran exemption, state law maintains that the veteran must own and occupy the house. A renter is not considered an owner. And a similar response would be for the poverty exemption. To qualify for poverty, it must be your primary residence, your homestead, and you must own and occupy the house as your primary residence to qualify. A renter would not be considered an owner of the property.
Very good. Richard will ask is asking, how does the university impact the tax base and how do you forecast for that? Like when Pfizer moved?
I understood most of it. Could you repeat the question? I could probably look it up.
Yeah, let's go for the, well, I can give you, do you have it up? Because,
Under Q&A.
yeah. So
How do you determine the PRE?
That's the most recent question. This
Okay,
one
how does
is
the university impact the tax base?
Yep.
Okay. So the University of Michigan is exempt from taxation, as are churches and schools and the city of Ann Arbor property. So how does it impact the tax base? I guess the only response I can provide is it doesn't provide direct revenue to the city. So it would be, I guess it would be a negative impact. The city, I believe, still provides services. The fire chief does collect revenue from the state of Michigan from the University of Michigan property and the state of Michigan owned properties. I'm not sure if I'm answering the question directly or not. Like when Pfizer moved, that's a fair question. That occurred, I believe, in 2009 or 10, if I'm not mistaken, when Pfizer was bought by the University of Michigan. The prior to Pfizer being purchased by the university, they were on the tax roll, and the city of Ann Arbor was collecting revenue from Pfizer Corporation. When Pfizer left the city or became tax exempt, both would be in the similar answer. There was a loss in revenue that the city no longer collected or could generate revenue from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it does have an impact. It's kind of hard to, a lot of it's baked in, right? The university owns the property that they own. Do you know, like off the top of your head, Jerry, how much property is owned by the university?
How many, well, as far as how many parcel or how many
as a
acres?
percentage, either as a percentage or it's no big deal if you don't know.
So I do actually have that, not in front of my screen, but we have been requested by council to establish those parameters and percentages of all tax exempt properties. I can compile that and send it to Sarah.
Yeah, I mean, it does have an impact, and I guess the only way to really answer that question is it depends on, if they're acquiring more property. When they acquired Pfizer, that was a significant amount of taxes. Pfizer at that time was one of the largest taxpayers in the city, and so that did have a substantial impact. But the period of time between when Pfizer left and the university purchased that property, those taxable values were already kind of coming off, and so it was a little bit of a gradual thing that took place, but the city was able to manage that. So the next question is, Donald said, does that apply to condos too? But I don't know what part that question came in. So he was probably asking about specifics.
As far as are they commercial? So
yeah, are they commercial? Yes, correct. Thank you.
So condos, no, because typically a condominium is a owner-occupied house that may be attached to a group of other houses. And the condominium owner can qualify for a homestead exemption. So they are most likely considered residential, being in a 401 class.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, typically condos have their own parcel numbers and their own property tax bills.
Correct.
And they're not
Correct.
like apartments, that's the biggest distinction is apartments are owned by a landlord or a property manager who's managing that property. So, and it's all one parcel number. So that owner is the one who pays the taxes, out of the rents that are paid. But all of these different exemptions, poverty, veterans, they all apply to property owners. The next question, and the last one that I have for you, is how do you determine that a PRE status is not warranted if the owner does not tell you? And if you learn of it after the fact, can you collect back taxes?
Very good question. So can you pull that question back out, Michael?
Oh, I'm sorry. I like to clean off my my board here. So it's how do you determine that a PRE status is not warranted if the owner doesn't tell you? That's the first.
Okay, so how do we determine? There's a couple of different ways. The state of Michigan is one of the primary resources and research avenues that we have. The state will audit the PREs of property, and they do that by looking at the income tax records and social security numbers and where do you claim to live, and then they match that up with you're getting a PRE in the city of Ann Arbor, but you claim to file income taxes in Sheboygan. You can't live in two places at the same time. So the state audits and actually denies principal resident exemptions for property owners.
Yep.
Diving down to a local level where Mike Pettigrew and I work on the treasurer and the assessing side. We also get informed by property owners themselves. We get informed by the building and planning department when they do rental inspections, and they say, we have a renter who's claiming a PRE. Can you check this? So our office sends letters out to the property owners. And then we also ask the state of Michigan, the PRE division, to also do their own investigation. Thank you. Investigation audit to see if the property owner qualifies for a homestead exemption or not. So there's a variety of different tools that we use. Some of them, again, are just a email sent to us from a property owner. Hey, I think someone living here is not doesn't own and occupy.
Yep.
We don't immediately deny the homestead. We do as much research as we can, and then we deny the homestead afterwards if we determine that the taxpayer does not qualify.
And am I right in saying that we can go back how many years? 3 years? The state and
correct. So state law allows us we can grant a homestead 4 years back, and the state would also do a denial also for at least 4 years back if they determine that taxpayer does not qualify. And what would happen is our office would petition the state of Michigan. The state of Michigan PRE division would then send a bill and direct the county to collect back taxes from that property owner.
Great. All right. Any other? I don't see any other questions, Jerry. So thank you very much.
Welcome. Thanks, Mike.
All right. So now I get to finish the show here. Again, I'm Mike Pettigrew. I'm the city treasurer. I've probably been around, as I look here, the longest out of this group. I started in 2008 as the deputy, took over as treasurer 3 years ago. about 3 years ago. So we have a few different areas that we cover in Treasury and customer service. The first one here is risk management. The city is self-insured and pays for its own claims. And what that really means is that we have several lines of insurance, liability, crime, property, auto damage, cyber. And when we say we're self-insured, that basically means we carry very large deductibles so that first dollar losses are absorbed in our risk fund. We do annual insurance renewals every year. Like I said, we have a number of different lines. In most cases, our policies are usually for 1 year. It's a very competitive, very hard market right now with insurance. The insurance market is experiencing a lot of turmoil with all of the issues you've seen across the country with civil unrest, natural disasters. So it makes it very difficult to find and acquire good insurance at a competitive premium. But what we do is we utilize these large deductibles to mitigate the cost of insurance. So that's what, when we say we're self-insured, we carry excess insurance when things get really bad. We have lines of insurance to go into. The insurance program is administered by the Risk Fund. It has its own chapter, Chapter 11 in the Code of Ordinances. Within that chapter, we define what the Board of Insurance Administration is. The Board of Insurance Administration is 2 council members and the city treasurer. So I sit on that board currently with Council Member Song and Council Member Nelson. The 3 of us are the voting members. We meet monthly to review and approve claims against the city, and also to review and approve expenditures from the risk fund, which include those insurance premiums. So most of our insurance lines renew on March 1st. We just got through our annual program for that. And next slide, please. So if we have a situation where a resident has encountered a loss that they believe the city of Ann Arbor is responsible for, what we do is we have an online form that you can find on our website. If you're unable to go online, then we do have paper forms available as well. But basically, you can go through that system. You can explain what your loss is, why you believe that loss is something the city is responsible for. And we kind of act like an insurance adjuster. The first thing we do is we take in all of your information, and city staff will review it, do a small investigation. But usually we turn over almost all of these to a third-party administrator who does an independent investigation. And they would provide a report. Basically, they'll reach out to the city staff that would have been responsible for whatever incident took place, in the public works department, police department, different areas. And after that, they'll reach out to the claimant, get their side of the story, kind of put everything together in a report for us. And every month we review these reports at the insurance board meeting and make decisions on whether to approve or deny the claim. Claims under $10,000 can be, claims under $500 are handled administratively by the Chief Financial Officer, Marty Prashan. Claims under $10,000 can be handled independently by just a vote of the Board of Insurance Board. Anything that goes over $10,000 that's approved for payment also needs City Council's approval as well. We meet on the 4th Thursday of every month. If your claim is denied, there's also an appeals process where you can meet. We meet virtually. The insurance board itself is not a board that's covered by the Open Meetings Act. So we do host all of our meetings online these days. If you have a claim against the city or you have an appeal, we basically bring you into that Teams meeting. You have a period of time to present new evidence, kind of state your case, and then we make a decision based on the information that you've provided. Next slide. Questions on risk management. Look at me, I'm going quick. Feels like I'm going quick. Do you have a risk officer or anyone who helps with risk management? So yeah, we have a couple different things for risk. We do have a safety manager. His name is Doug Forsyth. He's been instrumental in helping the city through our COVID precautions, but he also handles any OSHA issues we may have. He handles he doesn't handle workers' comp claims except for the incident reporting. Reviews incidents, tries to make sure we're practicing the safest procedures out when we're dealing with the public in our various jobs that can be somewhat hazardous at times. In addition to that, we do use a risk consultant, Highland Group, which is a local firm that helps us. They help us broker our insurance out to the various insurance carriers. They also provide risk management services. They have a cyber liability team. If we were to have an issue on a cyber issue, we could bring them in for help. And they're basically there to consult on any issues we might have with contracts with vendors, where we want to make sure the vendors have proper insurance. They basically are our catch-all. Whenever we have a question, we want to make sure the city is protected. We can go to them as well as go to Doug, who helps us out internally. Back to revenue. Has Ann Arbor ever considered a city income tax specifically to help offset lost revenue from the university tax-exempt property? That is a loaded question. Glad you asked that. And I really wish Marty was here to answer it, but I will give you my best answer, which is on a few different occasions, we have considered that. We have done several studies. They haven't been updated in several years. The biggest thing is with income taxes is that the statutory rules surrounding that and property taxes requires you to change the millages that you can charge on your property tax bills in an effort to somewhat offset that burden on residents, so that you wouldn't be paying a property tax and also being taxed on your income if you happen to work for the university. It's far more complicated than that, but when you do all of the analysis, we've done this analysis internally. We've hired people several years ago to do the analysis. There's usually some revenue gains in the short term, but they usually level out over time because income taxes are tied to people's income, which is, you hope your income always goes straight up, right? Property taxes is much more stable, especially in Ann Arbor. Property values tend to go up at a rate similar to or even better than other properties across the state. This is very valuable property here. So I would say it's a much more predictable term to have your property taxes, your revenue tied to property taxes than income. But that's my short answer. It's more complicated than that. The next question, and by the way, that wasn't a risk question, but I answered it anyway. How much dollars are paid out per year in self-insured claims? I don't know that number off the top of my head, and I'm not sure where I would go looking for it. So I'm going to ask if you really wanted. I'm not sure where I would go for that. I'd probably refer that question to the city attorney's office. I know people hate it when I say, or when you say talk to the attorney's office, but I would probably consult them on that because I'm not sure what information. Actually, I do know. So if you look at, we do file our minutes of the insurance board meetings are public, and they are attached to as communications or minutes to city council meetings. So I guess that would be the place I would look. I would send you to look first. Awesome, thanks. No, we've got that covered. We're on the subject of revenue. We're on the subject of risk management, but okay, let's see what the question is. Has the city reviewed the possibility of a pilot program, payment in lieu of taxes, posed to the university? Kim, do you know if that has taken place? Because that has not taken place in my area.
Not that I'm aware of. That I've not seen it in my time here either at the city. So
yeah, I would say that would happen at the executive leadership level with city administration working with the university. And I know that they want to foster that relationship. So I'm going to punt on that question. Next one I have is, does risk management deal with things like the risk of ransomware? How does the city manage that kind of risk? Great question. Cyber liability and cyber liability insurance was one of our most challenging renewals this year because of everything that you've seen out there. One of the biggest steps our IT department has taken and is really a requirement these days is multi-factor authentication. And if you're not familiar with that, it's the little tokens you see or the little codes you might get on your iPhone or your Android phone. So when you log in, it prompts you for a token code that is sent securely to your device that helps you log into the city's network. We're quickly coming to 100% compliance with that at the city, which is one of the best ways to fight ransomware. As I had mentioned before, with our risk consultant contract with Highland Group, we are able to go through and use them as a resource on questions about how to better secure our network. We do have a cybersecurity manager now in IT, and that's all she does is deal with trying to prevent, assess, prevent, and thwart risks to the network. So good question. That is one of the biggest areas that we're dealing with, especially from a risk standpoint. Liz, property values tend to go up in Ann Arbor. Does that mean there is more construction on owned properties and property sales relative to the rest of Michigan? Sorry for the assessment question. That's all right. Our assessor's still here.
That's right.
Jerry, does that, when property values go up, does that mean there is more construction on owned properties?
So, yeah, reading through the question, I guess relative to the rest of Michigan, I'll answer it a couple of different ways. Southeast Michigan, which is where Ann Arbor is located, does have more property and does have more growth than the Northwest, the northern part of Michigan. The property sales, as far as the dollar value paid for houses, our housing prices, our property value prices, not just housing, they are higher in comparison to the more rural townships in the Washtenaw County and even outside of Washtenaw County. Does that mean there's more construction on owned properties? There's a fair amount of new construction that goes on, of new builds, and also of remodeling of existing homes through permitting the process. So I guess compared to the rest of Michigan, based on the location being in Southeast Michigan, we do have more activity than other areas. Ann Arbor, has compared itself not out of just on as a comparison to the west side. Grand Rapids and Ann Arbor have similar growth and similar types of property. But let me think, property values tend to go up in Ann Arbor. Does that mean there is more construction on owned properties? I guess I'm repeating the answer, but
No,
yes.
I think you've done it, yeah.
But yeah, there is more growth and more new construction in city of Ann Arbor.
Yeah, that's good. I don't completely understand this question, Evan, so I don't know if you want to repose it. Would that be a border row they'd be asking for regarding self-insured claims? I'm not sure if I know the answer to that. So help me out if you want to repost that question. Feel free while we go on to the next session or section. I think it's my last. Treasury and customer service. All right, so the Treasury Service or service unit manages the city's cash flow investment and debt portfolios. We monitor internal controls. We collect parking ticket payments, property tax billing, utility billing. Yes, we're your favorite department because you get to pay us property taxes and parking tickets and your utility bills. And so we get to handle all of those and try to make it as painless as possible. The customer service center is located right there on the first floor of City Hall, and we try to be the face of the city for our citizens. So on an annual basis, we have 286,000 transactions. We get over 50,000 phone calls. We even handle some permitting, 4,100 permits. And we get about 37,000 walk-in customers a year. That all of these numbers are pre-pandemic. They have probably gone down quite a bit, and they've really shifted. So the red phone here that's ringing off the hook, you could probably add 2 or 3 more icons because the phone, mail, and other ways of people trying to contact us is skyrocketed more than people physically walking into our office. Next slide. So parking citations, I know that's one of the favorite things we like to talk about. So your current enforcement hours across the city are Monday through Saturday, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. We try to make it convenient. If you do get a ticket, you get a discount in the first 24 hours, the first business day. So you can pay online, by phone, by mail. I believe on our envelopes for parking tickets, we even have a little QR code you can scan to get right to the online payment app. Pay those tickets as quickly as possible so you can avoid paying additional fees on an already unpleasant situation. We've got two 24-hour drop boxes, or at least one is 24 hours. It's out on Ann Street. The other one is on Ann Street across from the garage for where the police cars go in and out. There's one right there. There's also a much nicer, pretty election box. So if you're doing mailed in ballots, you can put those in and pay your parking tickets at the same time. If you want to come into City Hall, the north, so that parking lot that's right past that drop box, if you park in that parking lot, you can come into that atrium area, and you can drop off proposals for Colin in there. You can drop off engineering plans, but you can also pay any of your bills that way. We've got forms out there for you to fill out. You can pay your property taxes in there. You can pay your utility bills. You can pay your parking tickets, all in that drop box. There's envelopes, anything you need that you can fill out if you want to have a contactless experience, if you don't want to walk all the way into City Hall and talk to us there. So, and of course, in person, we are open 8 to 5. We are open 8 to 5 physically in person in City Hall, Monday through Friday, with the exception of those government holidays and weekends. We do answer the phones from 8:30 to 5:30. So we have an extra hour there to answer your questions that may come in over the phone. We also handle parking citation appeals. So we have 2 people that we call parking referees. And what they do is, if you have an appeal, again, you can do these online. So if you do City of Ann Arbor parking ticket appeals, you should be able to get pretty quickly to our parking referees page. You can also file a form. Again, those forms are available in the atrium. They're also available in customer service, where you can plead your case to one of our 2 parking referees. And they are very responsive. They'll get answers back to you, whether they approve or deny it. If you're unfortunate enough to get a denial, you still have the opportunity to take your case to the district court. So you can, I believe it's called an informal hearing or a formal hearing with the magistrate. And we will walk you through that process so you can get over there and talk to them if you really feel that your ticket was issued in error. We try to do our best to make sure everything's done fairly. And we try to get you a response as quickly as possible. So don't ever take one of our responses that come quickly as we didn't thoughtfully plan it. We want you to have we want to, every question you get to us, we want to give you an answer consistently and as quickly as possible. So next slide. Oh, questions on treasury and customer service. Peter, well, just a comment. I live downtown, and anytime I get a parking ticket, I remind myself that parking enforcement is the reason I can usually find a place to park downtown. I appreciate you. Thank you. I'm not the one who writes the parking tickets, though. Those are the community standards officers. I don't know if they are lucky enough to do one of these academies with all of you, but we will pass that on to them. But you're exactly right. We don't write parking tickets for revenue. I know that's hard for people to hear, but parking enforcement is about circulating the parking inventory downtown. So I think extended hours, if they ever do that, the whole purpose of doing those things is that the parking spots outside of the businesses on Main Street, hopefully people go in, they take care of business and they come back out and they move on to the next part of their day or their evening. And you don't want people parking there for hours on end, blocking alleys, parking too close to fire hydrants, things of that nature. Those are all things that we want to, we want to make it a safer city and try to deal with those situations as we can. So thank you for that. I appreciate that sentiment. We'll make sure we share that with the CSOs. With that, I think we're on to our last slide of the day. And as promised, here are all of our contact emails. Sorry, we didn't give out our personal cell phone numbers. We're going to have to stick with emails, I think. But again, Marty Prashant is our Chief Financial Officer. She's fantastic, very responsive. So feel free to ask any questions to her or to any of us. And if you have any, I did get one more question. Is there any way to get clearer parking signs downtown, i.e. commercial parking during specific time signs are terribly confusing. Parking signs are difficult. I will definitely tell you that if you take a picture of a sign and you email it to me or you email it to one of our parking referees, we will go take a look at it. And we will do our best to try to work with the powers that be on getting as clear of signage as we can out there. Obviously, especially with those commercial parking spots, you're conveying a lot of information. It's 15-minute parking, commercial plates only. Before 6 o'clock, it's a tow-away zone. Don't park here on days that end in Y. There's just a lot of different things that are going on with those. So we do the best we can with those. But as always, if you see a problem, let us know and we'll do our best to address it. All right, well, we have one roundtable question. I don't know if this will be the last one or not, but kudos to everyone. Very informative. Good job, everybody. Could each presenter comment on what they think is the most important part of their job and what part of their job they like the best? Kim, you go first.
Oh, all right. Put me right on the spot, don't you? The most important part of my job?
Or the part you like the best, or both?
Well, the most important part, I think, is getting a balanced budget out for every fiscal year. That is very important. It provides a great guideline for staff from an accounting perspective and a management tool. I enjoy working on the budget in general. And to follow that up, I think the other most important part of my job is just making sure that as we're going through the current fiscal year, that we are staying on track and on budget. And if we're not on track, finding out why we're not on track and trying to solve that problem. So that is probably actually the part that I like the most about my job, is watching what's going on, tracking it throughout the year, and trying to solve any problems that do come up during the year.
Kim does a great job on making sure that the budget is just not a one-time thing. We throw it in a drawer somewhere. We keep going back to it and making sure we're living up to all those quarterly metrics I have to do. So
that's right.
Tammy, in your 6 weeks, what do you think of the city of Ann Arbor?
Well, I do love it here, but it really what's most important to me and what is happens to be what I like the most is the regulatory side of things. So, following all those various rules that come in and doing that just, it maintains the reputation of the city, of the department, that things that we're putting out are accurate, that they've been thoroughly reviewed and vetted, and not just by one person, but often by many. So I think the most important part is also my favorite part in that regard.
Great. Colin?
The most important part is, compliance and guidance. I mean, that's what I do day in, day out. Making sure that people are doing the right thing and they're doing it the right way. What part of the job do I like the best? I like the competitive aspect of what I do. When firms compete for business, the city wins usually. So competition is what I like the best.
Great. Jerry?
Well, I've been thinking about this as other presenters have been speaking. I guess the most important part of my job is working with my assessing staff, establishing values that are fair and representative of market values in the city. What I like best about my job is working with the property taxpayers, answering their questions. I may not give them the answer they want to hear, but I will be able to defend the best I can the answer that I do give them and to provide reasons for it.
Great. For me, I kind of go back to that dollar bill slide again, because that's one of my all-time favorite graphics. We don't just collect the taxes and they just stay here and it's just there for us to pay our salaries and do a few things. The work we do has an impact on schools, the state, libraries, the roads. We have an impact on all of those things. And so I can't go out and, fill the potholes or do the paving or organize the books at the library, but I can make sure that, at least from a financial standpoint, I've done everything I can to collect the money from the taxpayers and get it out to the taxing authorities that use that money to do the good work and the public good for all of you. So I try to look at it, like Jerry, I give out a lot of information. People say I've never been late on my taxes. I've never, 30 years, things like that. Can't you, this one time I made a payment that was missed, and unfortunately I'm very limited on what I can do, but I also think about, we've got Jerry, 39,000 parcels in the city. And this year we just finished up turning my stuff over to the county treasurer. We have 600 property taxes, real property parcels that I turned over delinquent. So out of 39,000, 600 of them I didn't get paid, or we didn't get paid. And that's really a reflection on the community who take it seriously to get their taxes paid. But I think that, for me, it's like when I'm talking to those 600 who are having trouble paying, I'm also representing the other 39,000 who did get paid. So you're all my customers, and whether you're standing in front of me or you're not. So with that, I don't see any other questions. Sarah, is there any official way we end these, or what do you like most about your job, Sarah?
I love all of my staff liaisons and my board and commissions, mostly because I talk to them every single day. So that's probably my favorite. I just like to know, I like to know about what's going on in every single part of the city. And because I'm in boards and commissions, I literally get to know everything. So it's kind of nice.
Yeah.
But let's end it here. I want to thank all of you so much for taking the time out of your night to talk to all of our participants, talk to the community. This recording will be available online. I figured out how to do it. So this recording will be available online on our resources tab under the A2CA webpage. And last week's recording is available. Next week will be CTN and Greenbelt. So that'll be exciting. And in person will be police and fire. So I will see everybody next week.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
Thank you.